Hi everyone, this is Dr. Marina Mangano going over chapter 5 of The Gift of Healing Hands. The dreaded chapter for me. This chapter about quantum physics and quantum medicine was definitely the hardest to write because of course, my specialty is in manual therapy. I'm not an astrophysicist, and so it was the most outside of my comfort zone. I definitely had to do the most research for this area. So this chapter I reworked, continued to work on, and it is now one of my favorites to read. And because I just needed the information that was out there to make sense to me. And I had to put things together in very individual, little tiny pockets of understanding so I could process them, I could witness their influence on medicine, I could experience them in my life outside of medicine, and that's what we're going to talk about in this little discussion today. So we are working on quantum healing, and already, what does that mean? Quantum physics or quantum mechanics, there are many, many branches of this science, and it is definitely kind of leaking into our non-scientific realm of life. So we're getting exposed to it in little blips, like in movies, and a lot of the Marvel movies right now. You'll hear, I reference Ant-Man talking about, do you guys just put quantum in front of everything? And they're like, yes, yeah, we do. Anything that they really can't explain in a scientific manner, in a physical, objective manner, directors and things like that, and kind of more of the flashy movies have been kind of dropping this word quantum to explain these little loopholes in their timelines and things like that. In school, we are taught very Newtonian physics. So everything has an objective outcome and everything is very predictable. So things like your force equals mass times acceleration, and when there is a action, there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. Those are really testable things, and unless you are in a field of study in which you would have higher levels of classes or different levels of classes to study quantum physics in school, most of us for our curriculum are really kind of kept in this introduction of physics, physics 1, physics 2, these Newtonian aspects. So it's a little hard to discuss. It's a little hard to help people understand why it's even relative to their life, their daily life, their medical life. And that's what this chapter is about. Really just introducing some topics, some concepts, and allowing you to kind of broaden your horizons and I kind of describe it as, to see big picture, we have to look microscopic. We have to look to atoms, into the building blocks of atoms. And so with quantum physics, I don't even like to use the word physics because I feel like such a fraud with that because I'm a chiropractor. I am a manual therapist. I'm a movement specialist. What does physics have to do with my life? But within quantum physics and within this chapter, you really are challenged. You are invited to be part of this conversation that really is happening all over and around us. And so with my specialties, with my interests, why I needed this deeper look into science, into electricity and vibrations and energy. I just couldn't take someone's word for it that this was something that we could use to help people. I needed to really understand why. And I am not going to be a master of some of the science and the physics behind this study, but it allowed me to make some sense of the exchange I was having between myself and my patients, electrically, energetically. Something as simple as walking by somebody and you get shocked, or you're like, oh my gosh, we really are electric beings, and allowing that to be a foundation of then what is to come with my acupuncture experience, with some of the temperature changes that people witness in their full body reaction to an adjustment, to a yoga pose, to a release that they have in a yoga pose. So I like to utilize everything in this chapter as a, hey, you know what, I think you're interested in this, and now I have the information printed out that we can get into that in-depth conversation, and you can study it in your own time. So, from the beginning, I really just describe the breakdown of the body. Yes, we are this big collective mass of tissue and cells, but right there, people are like, oh my gosh, you can't even conceptualize how tiny cells are and the trillions of cells that we have in our body. It's kind of overwhelming to even think about. But, at our tiniest, I love this diagram of like, this is a human. These are the systems within a human. This is the organ within that system. This is the lining of the tissue of that organ. In that lining of tissue, this is what a cell looks like. In that cell, this is what builds up a cell. And at the very beginning, that little tiny nucleus in the cell, this is what's going on in the cell. And so it's like I have to bring people like all the way back down to these little subatomic particles, the electromagnetic aspects of our tiniest building blocks of life. And by having that conversation, by even just taking a second to like visualize, I think this is how we can get people to really open their eyes to the magic of certain medicines and the idea that we are so much more than dead bones and solid muscles and layers of fat. Everything in our body is moving. Everything in our body is vibrating at these different sounds, almost like visualizing like an orchestra. Every part of the band has to be playing their own vibration, their own tone. A tone is a frequency and wavelengths of sound. And so dissonance is when one part of the band is playing a sound that's not blending with another and the vibrations are bouncing, clashing. But when everything is tuned and everything is on par, there's just this collective sound that we hear. Sound is one example of these type of wavelengths, and in the book I describe the light spectrum and the electromagnetic waves that we can't always feel experiencing happening us, but it's so cool to just even play with the concept of where along this spectrum we have access to feeling, we can conceptualize, and maybe we can even influence too. So that's when we get a little weird. But so back to the sound idea, when every part of a band is in this nice synchronized tune and sound, we hear a collective, kind of like what our brain can process. And in the last chapter discussion, I talked about how the reticular activating system in your brain will send things to the forefront, send things with priority to allow you to process what it wants to pick out, what it wants to hear, what it thinks is relevant to you. And that's something similar to a band. Again, if you're hearing everything, but you really are interested in the flute or you really like bass guitar, your brain will try to kind of pinpoint that sound within a big collective of sounds. And we're like, why are we talking so much about music? You can't not talk about quantum anything or physics or vibrations without discussing sound, just because our body is this huge collective instrument. And so sound is measured. Frequencies are measured in what's called hertz. Hertz is just a unit that allows us to put on a scale, a low sound versus a high sound. A low sound, the end of a piano, the far left of a piano has this deep, ominous tone, and that's because every time you press the key, the reverb that goes through the coils to the back of the piano slowly vibrates, whereas a high to the far right of a piano has a much faster wavelength, a quicker frequency, so the sound sounds high. And when you hear high kind of quick tones, they just for some reason make you feel a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more enlightened or lightened. And those deep, low tones are used for kind of those dark sounds and scores, and they're meant to create a reaction within our body. We relate to that sound. We put ourselves in the experience of that vibration. And so when you hear people say, oh, let's have good vibes, or man, that guy's just really high vibe, you already kind of understand what that means, even if you don't understand the science. But in relation to the body, if you were incapacitated and you were not able to move, the stagnation of your system not being mobile will eventually just completely globally affect your body. After, mobility of like your limbs, then your systemic, your blood flow is going to be a little bit more stagnant. Then the organs aren't asked to work as hard, so the organs become a little bit more stagnant. All of their functions, creating hormones, digesting food, creating temperatures, start to lose their ability to function. And so at that low mobility state, your body is kind of vibrating at a lower frequency. Whereas someone who is really alive and thriving, really mobile, is using a lot of their systems, using a lot of their functions, they're producing a lot more, their metabolism's burning off a lot more, like they're producing a lot more energy. They're using more energy, but their body's able to do something with it. And so, a healthy vibration, a healthy brain, a healthy body. Those are kind of where those ideas come from, like a high vibe, those high notes. We want to be in those really awe-inspiring type of vibration and just temperament in our lives. So when I'm trying to describe this idea of understanding that you are so much deeper, if we could look into your cells, like your hand is not just this dead 2D aspect. I mean, even if it's, of course, 3D, if you visualize looking at your skin, looking at all the cells that create the skin and how that is constantly in motion. You get cut and your body is just working underneath the seams to heal it, underneath the scene. So everything in your hand, it's moving. And that's just one part of your body. Everything underneath the surface of your skin is moving and regenerating and is shaking off and eating, dead skin cells and things that pathogens in your body that aren't healthy for you, that needs to be detoxified and then eliminated. It's really interesting to hear about things like the stomach, the lining of the stomach relines as a brand new stomach every 4 days about. That's insane. That's so crazy. If we just think that we are stagnant, if we think we are unable to learn new skills or to make a change in our life and just break a pattern of stagnation, that's such a lie. That's so false. We are always looking to further our experience, improve our experience, and we just need the right provider, the right support group, the right nutrition, and fuel to be able to make those changes. So as a alternative healthcare provider, that's what I get to talk about every day with patients. I get to get them excited about how amazing their body is at this like very deep cellular level. And when life gets too overwhelming because we see too much, we have to pull back into that tiny foundational particle of our day. Then step by step, when we feel safer, when we feel more supported or more healthy, we can start to branch out and start to have that willpower and all these different outlets. So in discussion of quantum physics and quantum medicine, this is really one of my true passions now. And the branch of quantum medicine, intuitive medicine, you'll hear me talk about that a lot. It just describes that somebody who really is in tune with their intuition and then uses it to complement their specialty, their career. So I have a medical license and I use my gut intuition that comes from a lot of training to recognize what I see in patients, to see patterns a little quicker maybe than somebody who, isn't as in tune with subtle changes in the body. But I'm always just staying within my realm of expertise. So I'm never fortune telling, or I'm never like giving people life advice that has nothing to do with what I can offer and what I'm trained to offer. So medical intuition is just feeling that there is something going on, knowing that there's an imbalance, a disturbance enough in your body to ask for help, to reach out to a provider, and just letting them know that, hey, I would like to start the conversation about this part of my health, this part of my body, and if this is not your realm, can you please direct me to whoever you think this is appropriate to talk about. So as we get to meet these really conscious patients, these really aware patients, we can get to just things that are so much more in depth than very superficial healing. because they're taking a partnership in what's going on. And so I hope by reading this chapter and really the entire book that, if nothing else, you know that there are things out there that you have access to that are so much more important and that are, going to offer you so much better benefit and more benefits than I think what we are traditionally exposed to within our medical system, within our science, and like especially with our emotional healing and the emotional chapter. So just to kind of make sure I'm not just blabbing here. I think some of the highlights of this chapter are being able to look small to think big. Looking at the insane depth within our own regenerating, electrically vibrating body to be able to understand how, if there are, 13 organ systems going on and everybody has to vibrate at their own pace, but somehow we are this huge collective of then an overall combination vibration. How could I be so separate from the person next to me going through that same electromagnetic experience, or the trees I walked by, the vegetables that we're eating, the food that we're eating? So looking small to think big. This type of, it's a little bit of a rabbit hole. Once you open this up, you really start to think about, oh my gosh, am I putting healthy fuel sources into my body? If I want my body to run efficiently and healthy, what am I putting in it? Am I helping to aid that healing process, or am I slowing it down? Am I making it sluggish and stagnant because it has to break down all these kind of really crazy processed particles instead of like a natural food source that your body knows what to do with it? It's built to digest it. It's built to benefit from it. It's also easier to eliminate things that are just from a natural source, like I said. And then also thinking big picture, not just like in nutrition or in your healing of that day, but thinking big about how we are affected by the other vibrations around us. And I think I called that little part of this chapter the invisible intruders. We are constantly being influenced by the invisible, of course, but by the vibrations around us, the electricity around us. So, I discuss a little bit about how to just make sure you are keeping yourself as safe as possible. It's completely impossible to avoid Wi-Fi and things that we're just kind of getting bombarded with every day, but there are just things to make your body more resilient, just like a disease or a virus. If we can create a higher immune system, we can't avoid the viruses around us and the pathogens around us, but if we can create a healthy system, your body has more resilience to it, can fight it off easier, and your nervous system is that electric system that would be most influenced by EMF and things around you. So higher immune system, properly functioning nervous system. Let's keep ourselves not combative, but let's keep ourselves in this high vibration state that we can kind of overpower a lower or a more disruptive vibration. Our vibration just is like a sound barrier to a lot of these negative things. Also too, the idea of like higher frequencies and things like that, just even in your conversation and your facial expressions and the words that you use. Words are built to build relationships, build experiences, but they can also cut, and they can relay negative experiences, negative emotions. And I really do believe in the power of those, like I discussed in our affirmations and our mental perception chapter. And so getting into vibrations, getting into frequencies and sounds, having the discussion about music and how it influences us, it's all part of my treatment. And there's many clinicians out there that believe the same and are using that model in their own life. And it's the easiest thing to express to a patient when you believe it, because you are a product of its success. So looking small to think big, using intuition as a gift, as something to bring peace to whoever you are discussing it with, or even if it's in yourself. So I do talk about a couple of negative experiences that I've had in this realm of people using just the word quantum as like a party trick, or to kind of scare tactics, people like using it as a scare tactic within treatment to show you, oh my gosh, your cell phone is killing you, and you know, the microwave is burning your brain, and all these things. So it's realistic. Hopefully it's very realistic approach, because I think that's what makes things sustainable. That's what makes this not an overwhelming amount of information that you can, you know, that you just get turned off and you're like, I'd rather not know because I don't know what to do with this. I don't think I have the skill set to be able to approach this and to be successful within it. So I'm just going to not learn it and block myself off and stay small-minded. And so I really hope this is as accessible as I planned it to be. And let me check my notes here. Yeah, I think we kind of nailed it. I would love to hear your questions of, you know, have you been exposed to the topic of some quantum frequencies and quantum energy, as well as your concerns and like where the blind spots are and where the holes are of, if I'm an astrophysicist or I'm reading your book, where in between does this information apply to me and why? So please go through, enjoy, and there are a lot of resources in this chapter for further exploration. Things like Silvaggio frequencies to listen to, understanding how the different chakras, which we're going to get to in the next chapter, have a coordinating frequency within them. So things like sound bowls will affect one of those neurological electric layers. Even simple like research studies to look at if some people just really need a little bit more hardcore evidence. And I think the quickest way to find that, specifically the understanding of that our body has this electromagnetic frequency, is looking up the parameters of the radius that your heart creates a field, an EMF field, because of the electric impulses that run and control your heart. So I think it's something like 10 feet around you, your heart rate can be read, the EMF that comes off of your body can be read within that 10-foot radius. So we walk by a lot of people. We are interacting with a lot of people within those bubbles. How could we not influence each other? So use this information for good. Help yourself. Recognize that you are so capable of healing, so capable of changing and vibrating to whatever level that you need. And that within that power comes a responsibility to share that, to improve the frequencies around you, and just to overall enjoy the opportunities we were given to be these very conscious healing selves. So have a great day. And we've got one more chapter discussion, and it's going to be my favorite, but we're going to be getting to yoga next, the last chapter of the book. So look forward to it. Have a great day.